Hello, and welcome to today's webcast, Supplier Sustainability Ratings for Procurement and Supply Chain Needs. I'm John Davies, Vice President and Senior Analyst at GreenBiz.com, coming to you live from downtown Boise, Idaho. I'm pleased, as always, to welcome listeners from around the world. Before we begin, a few housekeeping details. The screen you're looking at has a number of features I'd like to point out. If you have questions for today's speakers, simply type your question or message into the Q&A window on the bottom left of your screen. We'll be fielding those later on in this program. You can download the slides from today's webcast by going to the pod marked Download Slides on the bottom right of your screen. Finally, there's a live tweet stream in the upper right. Feel free to share what you're learning with the Twitter sphere. The hashtag for today's event is hashtag GRNBZ. Now let's get going. Does your organization know whether its suppliers are sustainability leaders or laggards? Does it include supplier sustainability scores in supplier selection and in supplier relationship management scorecards? If not, would you like to know how to identify highly credible rating tools that are suitable for use in a procurement context? If so, that's what we're going to give you in today's webcast. During this webcast, SPLC, the Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council, will be releasing a free market research guide that allows users to compare pre-screened third-party sustainability rating tools to find the one that best meets their organization's needs. All the tools included have been screened against 40 criteria developed by SPLC's members to ensure that the included tools are high quality, independent, impartial, and have procedures to address conflicts of interest. The rating tools included in this research guide evaluate suppliers on dozens of environmental, social, economic, and governance issues and cover suppliers in diverse regions of the world. So joining me today are a great set of speakers. Tim Hopper, Responsible Sourcing Manager at Microsoft, Sam Hummel, the CEO of the Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council, and Cindy Bush, Director of Environmental Health and Safety at Tessie Plastics. And when we get to the Q&A session, we'll be joined by Anastasia O'Rourke, Special Consultant with Industrial Economics, Inc., and a Board Chair of the Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council. After we hear from each of the speakers, we'll take a question or two, and then we'll leave time at the end for all the other questions that we'll try and get to. So feel free to start typing them in at any time. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tim Hopper, Responsible Sourcing Manager at Microsoft. Take it away, Tim.
Thank you, John, and greetings from Redmond, Washington. As John mentioned, I work with Microsoft's indirect suppliers and drive sustainability for them. And while today we'll be reviewing the merits of enterprise-level sustainability ratings, I wanted to point you to the full breadth of everything we do to advance sustainability with our suppliers. Just simply in your Bing search engine, type in Microsoft Responsible Sourcing, and you'll see our progress in our company's citizenship report. But for today, we're going to be talking about enterprise-level sustainability ratings. And to that end, I wanted to share a bit of our journey over the last decade. You'll see this in our report, in our citizenship report. But one part of the report talks about where we've worked with addressing enterprise-level climate change with our suppliers with a key stakeholder, the CDP, formerly known as the Carbon Disclosure Project. This has emerged as a best practice for a variety of ways, things that are listed in this slide, primarily around impact. We can actually share what the impact is with the CDP. We've reduced our collective footprint with our suppliers just last year by 7.5 million metric tons of CO2. With the CDP, also, we were able to communicate easily to our stakeholders. So to measure and communicate our progress, we just last year have about 70% of our spend now with suppliers who are actively disclosing their emissions and setting targets. And the CDP actually helps us provide a great motivation, we've included in our RFPs, strategic RFPs, tiebreaker criteria. So if suppliers are disclosing emission setting targets, they get extra points. It's a great motivator for suppliers to take this topic seriously. And we also offer our suppliers a Climate Change Leadership Award, where for them to compete with the award, they must be independently assessed and rated by the CDP as an A performer. And in this award packet, they share their innovations back to Microsoft and allow us to share those innovations and communicate. And so the partnership with CDP and the progress that we've had last year is possible. And I want to also just have this next slide shares the benefits of CDP just from an efficiency standpoint or a process standpoint beyond the results. The CDP actually, they do have the expertise. If you go into this topic very long, it becomes very technical. They're the experts, so they, rather than a procurement person become the expert on climate change, they maintain that expertise. They run a global disclosure system that provides both public and private purchasers, organizations, a consistent, standardized approach to share their impact. And this is not only with purchasers, but also with investors. The CDP's origins were born with the investor community. And this is a significant point. Alignment of investors, sustainable investors with sustainable purchasers, allows companies that receive these requests to have one consistent signal on how they actually manage their climate change as well as their water impact, which allows them to focus their resources on solutions that will appeal to both of those important stakeholders that they have. So they provide the expertise. They also provide independence from the ratings. It's not Microsoft telling you how our suppliers are performing on climate change. It's an independent entity. It's scalable. We can actually add more and more suppliers into this, and the suppliers' resistance to do this, as they see it, not only is for us, but they can leverage this exercise for other stakeholders, is better. And all of that's not possible if we would build our own system and have our own assessment. And it really helps us focus on what our job is, and that is to segment our suppliers and to improve their performance. And so it's one of the favorite things that I get to work on in my role here. It's worked incredibly well, and I think it really is the best demonstration of the importance of enterprise-level third-party sustainability performance and ratings, and something that purchasers should include in their toolkit. But all of that to set up the question that we had is this best practice that we've experienced with the CDP over the last decade, is this something that can scale to other areas, other sustainability areas that we need to focus on? And so the next slide, I want to first give thanks to Mike Wallace for allowing me to pinch the slide. Mike's from Brown Flynn, an ERM group company, and the point of this slide is to sort of show the tip of the iceberg for the landscape of enterprise-level sustainability standards, ratings, and rankings. And hopefully you can see just some of the complexity that a purchaser would have to navigate when they look at this. And indeed, when we did some initial landscaping on this, we did some research that revealed hundreds of third-party providers and even more products within that. And so the question for us is, with this landscape, if you frame the context around sustainability just around the enterprise, not thinking about site level, the eco labels around product groups or product levels, but just thinking about the enterprise level sustainability attributes of your supply chain, where would you go? How would you? Which one of these would make the most sense, and which would be useful in a procurement context? So to try to make our way in this landscape, Brown Flynn, as well as a variety of other organizations, joined us on a project to evaluate this, which you're going to learn more about next. But one of our key partners was the Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council, which is Sam, you'll hear from next. And our goal was really to evaluate those products and see if they hold promise for professional purchasers, that they shared some of those attributes that you saw with the CDP, where it's scalable, it's efficient, it appeals to many stakeholders. It aligns, in that sense, investors and purchasers. We really think that if we can find all of those attributes in this, and even the ones that John mentioned early on, that it's impartial, there's no conflicts of interest and those sort of things in their business models, that if we can find those products and tools that have the best impact and then share those with purchasers, that we can extend the impact of what we do with our purchasing dollars. So that's the background of this. We'll learn more about this model coming up with Sam. So back to you, John.
Great, thanks, Tim. And what we want to do now is we're putting out a poll there. You can see we're interested in your views about how does your organization evaluate the enterprise level sustainability of its suppliers. So if you could take a moment to vote on this. And Tim, I have a question for you. So do you have advice to people? You know, a lot of our audience is sustainability executives or who work in sustainability departments. Any advice as to how they should approach taking some tools like this to their purchasing organization to get them more involved?
Yeah, I would. I mean, that's a shameless plug, I think, for Sam, but the organization that we rely on most from the indirect spend perspective is the SPLC, the Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council. Their job and mission is to help orient purchasers, not only with the things that we're going to talk about today, but all other sorts of areas within sustainability. Sam will share in a little bit their organization. It shows a lot of the different actors, public purchasers, as well as private purchasers, where we can, building tools and resources that a company like Microsoft can use, down to, you'll see part of the membership is small community colleges. And so we're all sort of faced with the same issues. How do you make sustainable purchases? And so their mission is to help provide those resources for us and equip us to do so. So I would point them to the SPLC as a starting point.
Great. Well, let's see how the poll turned up. And what we're looking at is don't evaluate, the 30% don't evaluate suppliers on enterprise level sustainability. It looks like there's a lot of opportunity there for you, Sam. Sam, do you have any reaction to the poll numbers here?
Sure, thanks, John. No, I'm actually not too terribly surprised. I think that what we see here is it's very interesting, and it's interesting to see that there are actually, I would say what surprises me about it the most is that there are organizations that 23% of the organizations say that they are evaluating all of their suppliers on at least one sustainability metric, which is impressive. So I didn't expect to see that. Great.
Great. Well, let's move on into let's move on into your presentation.
Okay, great. So just quickly, for those of you who may not be familiar with SPLC, I think it'd be helpful to provide some context about our organization and why we're involved in this work. SPLC was founded in 2013 as a 501c3 nonprofit that convenes buyers, suppliers, and public interest advocates to develop shared programs for guiding, benchmarking, and recognizing leadership in sustainable purchasing by organizations. And today we have 200 member organizations. Our members come from a variety of different roles. We have purchasers, suppliers, public interest advocates, and standards developers and industry associations and so on. But the purchaser role members alone manage over $300 billion in spend annually. And what we do is we support them in implementing strategic sustainable purchasing programs. There are three main areas of activity that make up a strategic sustainable purchasing program, which I like to call the how, the who, and the what. There is how an organization institutionalizes sustainable purchasing into their internal strategy and processes. The who is how they incorporate sustainability into their supplier selection and relationship management. And the what has to do with the impacts and attributes of the products and services they buy. And SPLC offers guidance, training, benchmarking, and leadership recognition for each of these areas because all of them are important to doing sustainable purchasing at a leadership level. But today, we're going to focus in just on one aspect, which is the who aspect. In particular, this question, how does an organization know if its suppliers are sustainability leaders or laggards, and how they can evaluate them in a way that motivates leadership among suppliers. So what I want to do is, in this next few minutes here, is cover 5 things with you. First of all, why it is that we think at the SPLC that it makes sense to focus on enterprise-level sustainability, why that led us to a focus on ratings, which ratings we're recommending and why, and next steps for those of you who are interested in using ratings in your procurement practice. So first of all, one of the most common questions we receive from our members is this one: what questions should I ask all my suppliers about their sustainability practices? In fact, that question kicked off what is still the longest discussion thread in our online member community. And, here's what we used to say in response to that question. So at least what I used to say. Sustainability spend analysis typically shows us that the 80-20 rule applies to sustainable purchasing. 80% of your supply chain or procurement impact is coming from 20% of your suppliers. So instead of asking sustainability questions of all your suppliers, we recommend focusing on asking questions targeted at specific products and services of high priority suppliers. Like I said, that's what I used to say. But that answer has simply not been satisfactory to our members. I keep having members and chief procurement officers, especially chief procurement officers, come back to me and say, Sam, that would make sense if the only thing I cared about was being able to say that my organization's supply chain, largely smells like roses. But I want more than that. I want for my family and my employees and my customers to be able to live in a global economy that is truly sustainable from the top to the bottom. And we're only going to get there when every business is asking itself whether or not it is doing what it is doing is contributing to the creation of a healthy community, economy, and environment for everyone in a way that could persist forever. That's what we're aiming towards. We're asking ourselves at our company that question, and we want all of our suppliers to be thinking in that way too, all the time, not just when they are doing business with us. If you take the 100% footprint of all of our suppliers, it's bigger than our 100% footprint. So what I like to do is I've come to think of this as a new 100% rule. And basically what these leaders are saying to me is, if our vision for the future is that 100% of our global economy is truly sustainable, then that means that 100% of our suppliers will have to be sustainable too. And if that's where we're headed, why shouldn't we go ahead and make that clear to our suppliers, to all 100% of them, and in fact, even our prospective suppliers? And why wait to do that? If we wait, then that just delays the point at which they can get busy applying their ingenuity and entrepreneurship to bringing about that sustainable economy vision. So what these folks have said then is, what we need you to come up with, Sam, and SPLC, is a mechanism that allows us to evaluate our suppliers on their sustainability at an enterprise level efficiently, and to send a signal and know how well we're doing at bringing about via our supply base that future economy in which everyone is operating in a sustainable way. So the first thing that we did, if that's a question that is interesting to you and that you think is something that your organization is a signal that you want to send and evaluate your suppliers on as well, then you'll be interested in this next part, which is, why did we end up focusing on ratings as we searched for that mechanism? And so the first thing we did in the hunt for a mechanism that would allow purchasers to evaluate all their suppliers' enterprise-level sustainability was to convene a search party. And as Tim said, we want to give a big shout out to Michael Wallace at Brown Flynn for helping us organize so many great advisors for the project, and also to Dr. Anastasia O'Rourke from Industrial Economics, who took all that advice and helped us turn it into a rigorous search process. So it's important to note that we did not start from scratch, and we did not start with ratings. We looked at all kinds of existing tools, especially ones developed by the socially responsible investing community, which has been working for decades on figuring out how to measure whether a company in any industry is environmentally and socially responsible as an enterprise. And we also looked at all these tools because we recognize that many of our suppliers and companies have put a lot of effort into earning recognition through a number of these different programs. And we wanted to see, if they were programs that could be used in a procurement context, we wanted to give those programs that chance and, potentially make use of that work. Ultimately, we came to the conclusion that enterprise-level sustainability ratings were the most practical and defensible method of evaluating an entire supply base. And we decided this because sustainability ratings are accessible to all suppliers at all maturity levels. So your certifications, your awards, your rankings, and many of these other tools, exclusive indexes, are simply not accessible for meeting suppliers where they're at, whereas a rating allows us to do that. It's also one of the things about the rating tools that we looked at was these rating tools were ones that could be applied to all types of suppliers. What that means is that we did not look here at rating tools that were specific for a very specific industry or a very specific type of business. We were looking at tools that would allow us to look at suppliers across an entire supply base. And so then the next question was, okay, once we'd identified these 51 rating tools that met those criteria, how would we know which of those were the ones that were the best to use? And in looking more closely at them, we found that they are not all created equal. For example, ratings can be subject to a conflict of interest, such as when the rater is selling score-improving consulting services to the rated companies, or they can lack sufficient data verification to be providing a truly reliable metric. Rating tools also vary in their capabilities, regional coverage, issue scope, depth of analysis, and more. So some are very strong in assessing a few issues or regional areas, while others cover many issues and areas, but with less depth. And we believe that which rating tool will be right for a given organization will depend on its priorities. We don't believe that there's one rating system that does it all or probably could do it all. And so that's why what we've endeavored to do is take our analysis and turn it into a market research tool that those of you can use to understand the landscape of tools and identify from the ones that we believe are most credible and highest quality, the one that would best suit your needs. So since I know many of you are interested in kind of cutting to the chase and saying, okay, what are you recommending here? I'm going to do the order that way. I'm going to go ahead and tell you about the rating tools that we're recommending here, how you can interface with those recommendations, and then I'll cover quickly a little bit more detail about the evaluation criteria that is why we are recommending them. And then finally, I'll again touch on some of the things that you may want to use or think about in using these tools. So first of all, if you go to sustainablepurchasing.org/raters, that is where you will find the recommendations. Currently, there are 6 raters that we're recommending: CDP Supply Chain, EcoVadis, MSCI, OECOM Research, Robeco SAM, and Sustainalytics are all tools that made it through all of our criteria and received the recommendation. We believe that any of these tools you could use with your suppliers, and it would be a valuable addition, a valuable way to signal your intention to have them be part of the sustainability solution, and a valuable way to evaluate whether or not they're succeeding in that. If you go to that website, you will also be able to drill into detailed profiles of each of those, where you can read about their specific attributes, costs, and other things. And then one thing that we think you'll really enjoy is a head-to-head comparison ability that will allow you to line them up next to each other and see, which ones have the things that you need. You can customize that table and email it off to folks or share it with folks to your heart's content. And hopefully, to the question that went to Tim earlier, this is the type of thing that will help you be able to go to your purchasing professionals and show them something from an independent third party that answers the types of questions that they're going to have. And if it doesn't, I want to know about it, because this is a new tool, and it's something that we can improve over time. So now, why these 6 tools? What did they achieve? And so I want to be clear that we developed a rigorous evaluation process that you can download and read about on that same website. And it covers 3 main areas that we looked at: the rating organization and their processes, the rating criteria and the rigor with which they evaluated that criteria, and the coverage and accessibility, so where they were operating and how accessible their program was. One of the things that we did was we built on a lot of existing work in this project. So as we were looking at those 3 areas, the factors that we decided to evaluate were informed by existing principles and standards, as well as indicators from many of these programs that I think many of you will be familiar with. And so they're cross-referenced and so on if you look at that report. So just to give you a sense of what some of those were, within the rating organization processes, one of the things we were looking for was impartiality, making sure that these are fair ratings, and also stakeholder engagement. It's really important that if stakeholders are engaged in the process of considering how these questions are being crafted, how they're being evaluated, and how they're being scored, then it's more likely to be a credible rating. When it came to rating criteria and rigor, a really important thing that we looked at was whether or not the criteria was being tailored for the type of supplier. So if they were rating one type of supplier versus, say a manufacturer versus a distributor, were they asking appropriate questions that really got at the relevant and material impacts for that type of business? And then coverage and accessibility, so things like how many regions and sectors were they able to cover, as well as a number of other things. So then that's the evaluation framework that we developed. The actual evaluations were conducted by an independent third party. We invited the raters to answer all the questions and respond to all the factors in the framework. Those responses and the evidence provided by the raters was scored by actually 3 people. And then if that score was above a certain threshold, they were approved to be included in our recommendations. And we communicated those results back to the raters and had made sure that they understood where that rating was coming from before publishing these ratings publicly. So that's where we've come from. I want to go on to the last thing, which is, this is a somewhat new practice using these rating tools across all suppliers, as we saw in the poll results earlier. And what's exciting is that one of the advantages that a rating has, it has a number of advantages, but one of them is that because everything rolls up to one number, it's possible to use that number in a lot of places. And we're seeing organizations stick it in all types of their parts of their process. So they're using it we've seen using it to screen suppliers for risk management purposes. It can be used in bid scoring, can be used in preferred supplier programs as criteria for getting into the preferred supplier programs or award programs, balanced scorecards, and so on. But one thing that's been interesting that we've seen as we've been looking at this is a real growth in their use in corporate sustainability goals. So we're seeing more and more organizations publicly say, our goal is to have X% of our supply base rating above ABC level in a third-party independent rating platform on their enterprise level sustainability. So these are just some of the ways that you could think about using these ratings in your program, as well as some of the ones that we see emerging that are pretty exciting. But one thing that we recognized in this work and through our supplier assessment working group is that there's more to do to advance this area of practice. For one, we're really excited that we're partnering with sustainability on the reboot of the raters analysis. Sustainability in 2010, they're a think tank and advisory firm that analyzed the dozens of investor-led sustainability rating tools in order to help investors determine which ones were worth using, in order to help companies know which ones they should prioritize responding to. They're now updating that research and have invited SPLC to contribute our analysis. And we hope that this will further promote convergence in the way investors and purchasers are evaluating company sustainability. Secondly, we're going to be working over the coming year with our supplier assessment working group on producing a supplier assessment handbook. So I just described some of the ways that we're seeing organizations start to use this in their business process, but we're going to try to really document all of those and not just document what they are, but also the best practices for doing them and make it into a how-to guide. And if you'd be interested in participating in that process, we would love to have you engaged. And then finally, one of the things that we identified in this process was that certifications really are a useful tool as well for assessing suppliers, and that they deserve further attention. So our supplier assessment working group over the last year developed a similar evaluation framework for evaluating whether or not an enterprise level certification, sustainability certification would be valuable for use in procurement decision making and supplier relationship management. And we are going to be starting to evaluate certifications and standards as part of our new program called SPLC Sustain. which seeks to clarify in a similar way as we've done here the landscape of certifications, sustainability standards, and labels. So if you're interested in any of that future work and any of those conversations, I would be remiss if I didn't let you know that our awesome community of really engaged and passionate professionals are gathering in May in Minneapolis, and you're invited. You don't have to be a member to attend. So if you want to jump into the conversation, this is one way that you can get engaged. So that's all from me, John. Have we had any questions?
Great, thanks, Sam. We've had some questions roll in, but first I just want to encourage everyone, one, to send us your questions using the Q&A. And also we've got another poll up asking if you are using a supplier sustainability rating in your organization, where are you using it? And so you can see the list of choices here. We'll give you a minute while I ask Sam a question. So Sam, one of the questions we got in was, do you have data on how many of your members were using each of the 6 tools?
That's a great question. We don't, and that's something that actually, now that we're publishing these results, is something maybe we should do, is try and survey our members to find out. I do know for a few of them, I've asked them which of our members are using their tool, and we have quite a few members who are using some of the tools, but we haven't analyzed it across all of them. Okay, and so one other question that came in while we're letting people answer the poll. So has the SPLC's mission evolved as your membership has grown? That's a good question. I don't think that our mission has evolved. I think that the number of conversations that we're hosting has evolved. You know, one of the things that is special about SPLC, I have to say, is that we seek to build on existing work. Our goal isn't to recreate the wheel. And what we believe is that great work is happening throughout the economy, throughout sector and industry and organizational, collaborations. And that the benefit that we can really provide is hosting a space where the professionals who are making that work happen in all those other places can find each other, share what they're doing, and have those best practices spread across the economy. And so I will say that, I did not expect necessarily that we would be doing this project when we launched the council. But it's one that our members wanted. It was a conversation that was coming from all the different stakeholders, and so we hosted it. Sounds great. Well, let's look at the results from the poll. All right, over half of them are not using any supplier sustainability rating in the organization. Does that surprise you? Does that map to what you normally see? Yeah, it doesn't totally surprise me, especially given the results that we saw earlier. But what does surprise me, again, is seeing that 21% have a corporate sustainability metric that includes the use of an enterprise-level supplier sustainability rating. And so I'd love to dig more into that and find out what are those metrics that they're using. I wonder, some of them are probably, well, I don't know. We'll have to dig more into that. That's really great. But I also love seeing that they're using it as part of supplier development and supplier recognition programming. And also, I think the thing that suppliers will want to pay the most attention to is the bid scoring and the supplier business reviews. The fact that you've got 10% and 12% of folks there already using this in making their business purchasing decisions. Right, that's great. Well, now I'm going to hand it off to Cindy Bush, who's the Director of Environmental Health and Safety at Tessie Plastics. Cindy, let us hear about your experiences.
Oh, thank you, John. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be on the call with you all today. And when I look back, we're a tier 1 supplier for many major customers. And when I was first setting this webinar up with Sam, we were talking, and he said, Cindy, obviously by Tessie's growth and improvements over the years, doing a sustainability assessment certainly hasn't slowed us down. And I have to tell you all today that actually being asked to do the sustainability assessments has really helped propel us towards the success that we're experiencing today. I thought it might be helpful before I get started about what we have done with our sustainability initiatives. I thought I'd tell you a little bit about Tessie Plastics. We're a global contract manufacturer with a specialty in injection molding, and we were founded by Henry Beck in 1973. So we've been around several years, but we're still a privately held, family-owned company. And we've grown to over $300 million in annual sales, and our footprint has expanded to well over 1.6 million square feet. And we're nestled in beautiful rural central New York. And what I'd like been asked today to share with you is a little bit about the sustainable journey that Tessie Plastics has been on since 2010. And our challenge was, how do we take the aspirations of so many of our large customers and put it into action as their responsible Tier 1 supplier? As you see on the chart slide you have in front of you, you'll see a chart that shows our growth in sales and our growth in our footprint has risen over the years, while our emissions, our safety record, and our injuries have lowered. You know, I heard Sam talk about customers asking about a certain percentage of their supply chain to be responsibly sourced. Well, several of our customers have clearly declared sustainable procurement aspirations of having 80, 90 to 100% of their Tier 1 supply base be placed with socially responsible suppliers. So how do we, as a Tier 1 supplier, take those aspirations and put them into actions? Or as I like what Sam said, is how do we go from being a laggard to a leader? So one of the first things that we did was we sat and we looked at our policies. And the policy that I want to share with you today is our corporate social responsibility policy. And when we were developing this, we know that our policy speaks to not only our commitment to meeting our customers' sustainability goals, but we knew that we had to, from the get-go, ask the same of our suppliers. And one of the things that, if you had told me 7 years ago that I'd be showing you a slide of Tessie Plastics' commitment to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and let alone been invited to speak at the UN conference on the SDGs and its for the private business sector, I got to be honest with you, I would have told you that would be crazy. But one of the exciting things that happened here at Tessie is that we figured out early on how, when we were first asked to do our first shared platform sustainability assessment, how to use that to help us build a strong foundation and put in place the changes that we knew not only would be good for Tessie, but for our community, for our employees, and for the planet. Now, when I think about our story, we go from the UN and setting sustainability development goals. But, one of the things that we're proud of at Tessie is we know our story, we know our history, and we like to be transparent. So I kind of like to talk about this slide from my perspective, and I like to jokingly say, how did Tessie go from 0 to hero in 5 years or less? And this slide speaks to that for us. In 2010, we were asked by our largest customer to do our first CDP submission. Now, I got to be honest with all of you. I'll confess that probably in 2010, I might not even have known how to spell sustainability, let alone do our first submission. But what I do know is that Tessie understood the concept and the belief of being a good steward. We understood stewardship of our people, our planet, and our products. So we first jumped into our first CDP submission in 2010 that really enabled us to start getting real about our circumstances as a manufacturer, but also to start really appreciating how we can better be a good steward of our people, planet, and our products. Now, I already told you I like to be upfront and honest with you, so I will tell you that our first CDP submission, our score was an E. And I hate to tell you this, but it wasn't for effort. But we persevered. One of the things that happened during that 2010 year of doing our first CDP submission is that we developed our first EHS management team. We knew that we needed to start building a good, strong foundation. And the CDP submission was that fundamental building block that we first needed to step on as we began to build our program. Then over the next couple of years, we took our stewardship of our people seriously, and we really started focusing on making sure we achieved and met all federal and state regulatory compliance. We developed a strong environmental management system. And then in 2013, we were asked by the same large customer to do our first EcoVadis survey. Now, when I first got that, if I thought doing my first CDP submission was going to be tough and a challenge for us, the EcoVadis survey really opened our eyes to the opportunity that we weren't done yet and there was a lot more work to do. The EcoVadis survey really is when it kicked in for us as a Tier 1 supplier that we had more work to do. So as we continually progressed, we knew that public declaration of our goals was key, and so we published our first stewardship report. We continue to work on our program, and I'm very happy to tell you that in 2015, we were named a Johnson & Johnson's Supplier Sustainability Award winner, and that was a great honor for us. I believe the slide might not be showing, but the next slide would be talking to you about our achievements. So how did we start in 2010 getting an E on the CDP, and in 2013 doing our first shared platform sustainability survey with EcoVadis? Where are we at today? Well, from working on those foundations of the CDP and the EcoVadis, we were able to achieve a silver rating level with the EcoVadis, which placed us in the top 7% of all suppliers in the category of manufacturing of plastic products. For the CDP, remember that E I told you about in 2010? Well, because of all the work and programs and emission reduction activities that spurred us on to take on, we now achieved the leadership band A category scoring for both climate and water management. Some other things that being asked to do the EcoVadis survey and the CDP submission really opened our eyes, and the programs that we were able to develop, some of the other benefits and achievements we've seen is just since 2012, we've reduced our waste company-wide 53%. While we've tripled in size and number of employees. In our stewardship to our employees, we've seen that the better we take care of the physical conditions of the workplace, we're also seeing accident rates drop. Not too many years ago, our workers' compensation experience modification rating achieved a low rating of 0.62. Our carbon emissions are down, all because we had to get started with changing how we did our business. So how do we use these surveys as a supplier to really shape where we are today? Well, one of the key things is we realized that we had to get real about our circumstances. You know, they say you can't know where you got to go if you don't know where you are. So then it enabled us to put into motion a meaningful corrective action plan that we could openly share with our customers to see that we're not satisfied with maybe our score today, but here's our plan to be better tomorrow. One of the things that I'd like to share with you that really helped us as a supplier achieve so much in so few years is that the EcoVadis survey, as I like to say, was our guidepost to really building our sustainability program. I took all the things that we didn't do that great on the EcoVadis survey, and we used them to build our program. We did our research, we did our homework, we put initiatives in place. For example, if you want to know how does somebody reduce their waste that much in so few years, well, when we first did the EcoVadis survey and the CDP, I said, well, what's the one thing that's the heaviest that we throw at a landfill, which in injection molding is our purge. 198,000 pounds of it used to go to a landfill, and I'm very proud to tell you today that since 2011, it's all been recycled. The other pieces of this that I think have been very helpful is how much the results of our sustainability program, and yes, our scores have helped as well on the EcoVadis and the CDP, is to differentiate Tessie Plastics from its competitors. Very proud when I think that we're one of the highest scoring suppliers for one of the largest companies in the world. We've seen the ROI for being actively engaged with these two assessment platforms. We've seen money move, and I think that that's the one thing. Somebody asked once, has anyone ever seen money move towards your company because of your sustainability initiatives? And I can believe that Tessie has seen the financial benefit of being a responsible manufacturer. We've seen a reduction in cost of injuries, and also it's resulted in having to do less work. I know that sounds crazy, but when you do the right thing every day and you're focused on being good stewards and achieving and meeting your customers' expectations, your day and your work just takes on a natural momentum. And I think that that has really led us to our success. The one thing that's really helped about having a shared platform is with one single click of a mouse, we can share our one assessment to many customers. And it also, that really helps us with prevention of audit and survey fatigue. And we are now in line with our corporate social responsibility policy, asking the same of our suppliers. So I think when I bring this to a close for you is the Tessie Plastic experience. I want to just say, if you're thinking about whether you should ask your suppliers to become participants in a shared platform sustainability assessment, I would tell you yes. Because the score is not their final story. Everybody worries about what will their score be. The score is the start, and it's not the end. I really want to invite everyone on the call today to see sustainability assessments as a risk mitigation tool for operational and reputational risk. I encourage you not to prejudge your supplier's response. Ask them. If no one had asked us, I wouldn't know what we would be doing today. But by being asked in 2010, to do that first CDP submission, to do an EcoVadis assessment, I can tell you it has changed us for the good, not just Tessie, but the plastics, Tessie Plastics, but our planet, the life of our employees, and the quality of our products. I like to kind of think that I'd like to challenge everyone today to kind of think about my personal definition of CSR, which is coaching suppliers responsibly. You know, how can you coach your tier one suppliers and push these values down through your supply chain to help find ways to differentiate them from their competitors and to help them be the supplier that you so rely on? So thank you so much for listening. And John, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Cindy. And you're getting a lot of congratulations on the great work at Tessie Plastics. And I've got a question for you, but first I just want to tell everyone we've got a poll up again here. asking, has your organization set a goal for the enterprise level sustainability performance of its suppliers? So we're going to give you a minute to respond to that poll. So Cindy, one of the questions that came in is that you did a lot of great work. Has your EHS team had to grow in that period? Have you added members or increased your budget in order to do all this?
I like to say a small but mighty army, John. I have 3 staff that are dedicated to environmental health and safety initiatives across the corporation. When we think about budgets at TESI, we're lucky that the president of our company invests well and invests in us, and so we're not confined to a budget model. Whereas I strive every day to, I can't make money, John, but I can sure figure out how to save it. So when we went self-insured for our workers' comp, that resulted in a significant cost savings, and also just mitigating risk in our operation. It frees us up and it frees up cash. And also, we've enjoyed the profits from selling so much of our materials and scrap and waste to reputable recyclers, which has generated an income stream from our sustainability initiatives, where we then in turn reinvest some of that income into the buying of renewable energy. And actually, we have on the table conversations about how do we, in 2020, start generating renewable energy. So that's how we've been able to do it so successfully.
Wow! Once again, great congratulations. Well, let's look at the results from our poll. So, how many have set goals? We see 31% considering it, only 7% who have set and communicated, and another 6% set goal and announced it publicly. Sam, what do you think about these results and how they look in terms of what you would expect from your membership and people that are considering joining SPLC?
Sure. Yeah, and the goal of this isn't to have everybody join SPLC, but this tool is free and available online to anybody who wants to use it. This research support tool, but certainly we welcome having folks who are thinking in a leadership way about this get involved with the council. And so one of the things that I noticed in this poll here is that only 6.9 and 6.2% say that they have a goal, and then only 6% say that they are publicly communicating it. Which, to the earlier point about some of these visionary CPOs, chief procurement officers, who say to us, look, we can't get to the global economy that we want to have if we're not asking the companies that are in our supply chain to help bring it about. Well, what this poll result shows is that only 6% of even the folks on this call are asking their supply chain and their suppliers to help bring about that world through the way that they are wholly managing their business as sustainability stewards. And so there's a tremendous opportunity to initiate activity by all the human capital that's tied up in all of those supplier businesses. If we were to start initiating that call, the way that we might start to see what's happened at TESI, happen in so many companies, and we really could see a massive revolution. There's a big opportunity here, I think. Great.
So now I want we have just a few minutes left, but I want to try and get to some of the questions. And just for our audience's knowledge, we do collect all these questions, so I expect that the presenters will respond to specific questions that you have for them. But Tim, I have a question that came in that I think is right up your alley, and it was, how heavily weighted does a supplier sustainability ranking have to be in order to make a difference? We always hear about procurement being cost, quality, time, timely delivery. How much does sustainability rating have to, how big does it have to be to make a difference?
Great question. It really does vary on our side of the house. It's different by category as well as by supplier type. The heaviest weight in a category, if you think of the cost, quality, risk, capabilities paradigm, we have a dimension of sustainability incorporated that within the sourcing decision. It's about 15% of the deal. The minimum one would be 5% for some of our strategic procurements. So that's sort of our range, but that's how we think of it with regard to the traditional drivers on how we source a decision.
And then, so how many people are you rating? Are you asking to rate? And is it all of your suppliers, or how do you tier that?
Yeah, the ratings is different. So with the CDP rating, so how that gets reflected in that I mentioned earlier, how that gets reflected in the procurement is that they're actually within the sourcing decision, whether they're actually listing their emissions and setting targets and those attributes. That's what we currently have in our sourcing decision. And so we invite suppliers to do that once a year annually with the CDP. That's how their process works, and then suppliers' performance can be reflected in that. And ones that do that will have the incentive to do that if they don't do that the following year for their performance. Hopefully answered that question clearly enough.
Yeah, good. So Anastasia, you've been looking at a lot of the questions coming in. Just curious if there's something that caught your eye that you'd like to share with the audience in our waning minutes here.
Two questions that have come up. One is, the burden on suppliers to be answering all of these questionnaires and responding to these ratings. And I think that's a big motivation for the Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council to look to begin with the council, and then to look into these systems to say what's already going on and what can you use. So we really want to encourage everyone to be using really great tools that have already been built with teams of people who are, doing the analysis and in many cases guiding companies and suppliers through that rating, rather than sending out a survey or a questionnaire themselves. And then once you get the results back from your suppliers, really having a plan for what you're going to do with them. So knowing, is it part of a supplier engagement program, or are you going to build it into sort of certain criteria one way or the other? And some of the different ratings tools providers are making that data really accessible and building APIs and other kind of data integration platforms, so that this rating then goes off into, say, Ariba or a big supplier, procurement platform, so that takes again the burden off the supplier to have to sort of have this information be put in all these different places that purchasers would want to put it. So we're really looking at a sort of many-to-many type of data platforms here, and we want to encourage that. So that's just one question that came up, and some of them are quite accessible price-wise too for the companies or the suppliers to go and get themselves rated, and others are free if there's a client on the other side paying for it. So it depends on the system there. We have some information on that on the SPLC site.
Great. And Sam, we're just about out of time, but any last final thoughts for today before I wrap things up?
Sure. One of the things I'm seeing in the questions are people asking about the difference between enterprise level and category specific impacts. And it's important, as we said at the beginning, that you be doing sustainable purchasing holistically. As a strong program, we really believe that you need to be both looking at the what of what you're buying as well as the who. We were focused today on the who, but for sure, for those issues around particular, say, chemistries or things like that, it makes sense to have category or product level strategies that you're also engaging your suppliers around.
Great. Well, that is all the time we have for today. I really want to thank Tim Hopper from Microsoft, Sam Hummel from the Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council, Cindy Bush from Tessie Plastics, and Anastasia O'Rourke, Board Chair of SPLC, for a really great and informative conversation. And thanks also to our webcast director, Isa Stamos, for making everything flow so seamlessly on the back end for all of us. This will be archived on greenbiz.com. I know some people asked about the slides. If you refresh your screen, you'll see the download link there, and it'll be available for replay later today. And as always, for the latest news, tools, and best practices on sustainable business, and not to mention upcoming webcasts like this one, visit greenbiz.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter, GreenBiz. On behalf of my colleagues at GreenBiz, thank you very much for attending today's webcast. I'm John Davies, and until next time, have a great day.